Plenty of founders will say, after a certain stage, I feel dead inside.
Alisa Cohn is executive coach who works with many Fortune 500 companies and joins us live from New York. Alisa, great to have you with us.
Relish being wrong. A few years ago, I discovered something that blew my mind. You can't convince people with strong opinions to change their minds. And if you try, they just dig in harder.
One of my biggest challenges for the longest time, and I think it's still probably a challenge, is people, right? Because I'm from an engineering background where one of the things I think you've said is that leadership is kind of an unnatural act for many first-time founders. And that's definitely something I've resonated with at times for sure.
Leadership is an unnatural act. And if you question that, ask yourself this.
Welcome to the Lean Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Allan Dib. Today I've got a guest, Alisa Cohn. And Alisa is an expert at people, and especially an expert at people in business. She's the author of From Startup to Grown Up. She's an executive coach, helps people really understand the people side of things, the mindset side of things, the metric side of things, of really growing and scaling a business. I had the pleasure of meeting Alisa recently at an event. It was so cool to share a few days with you, Alisa. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Allan. It's so good to see you again.
So for people who don't know what your background is, do you want to give us a couple of sentences on who you are, who you do it for, and then maybe we'll get into it?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I've been a coach for 25 years. I work kind of with two kinds of people. I work with elite founders and help them think about how do they need to scale themselves as they scale their business. And I also work with C-suite executives in larger companies, Fortune 100 companies, and I help them think about where are they going and how are they going to get there, but specifically in light of sort of an entrepreneurial mindset. Like how do you move things faster even inside of a large company? So that's how I think about it. And then I also do offsites, and I write for Fast Company and Harvard Business Review and Forbes and Inc. And I speak a lot, and I have my own podcast called From Startup to Grown Up. So that's like my full plate of the things that I do.
Nice. Actually, I mean, it's a very different group, the people who are running large companies, CEOs, executives, and then the people who are starting a scrappy new startup. What are the commonalities between them, and what are the differences that you find you need to translate between one group and the other?
Well, the commonalities are always commonalities to all of leadership, which means really figuring out what's working about what I'm doing, what's working in the context that I am now. So for large companies, what that often means is, how do I help people who I don't ever talk to? It's like a large company, understand the vision, where we're going, understand the top priorities, and kind of maintain a high metabolism inside of a culture. And so that's very different from a startup, which is fighting for their lives every day. Founders there have to think about, where do I lean in and where do I lean out? And I would say a never-ending story. It's constantly adjusting as you grow. Obviously, the stakes are higher in a startup, but I would also say that what I bring to startups is a lot of the process orientation that Fortune 500 companies take on. And then what I bring to large companies is kind of more of an entrepreneurial mindset metabolism.
Yeah. It's always been my view that business is the world's best personal development vehicle. Whatever issues you have in your personal life, they're going to be magnified tenfold in your business. If you're late all the time, it's going to be in your business tenfold. And I think for me, one of my biggest challenges for the longest time, and I think it's still probably a challenge, is people. What are your thoughts on how do they kind of break through that next level?
Yeah, first of all, I have always said the same thing. We're obviously like twins here, because that's like everything important in your life happens in the context of work. I really kind of believe that. Also, frankly, your healing shows up at work. Grew up in a household which didn't have healthy conflict. And then you learn inside of a company to have healthy conflict after a lot of trial and error and a lot of coaching, a lot of guidance. That is like a triumph over the past. It is such a beautiful moment for you as a human being. So I think it's like holy work, actually, working with people in a workplace context. You may not be a people-y person, anyone out there. This is not about like necessarily making you a better person. It is about the success of your business, because you'll never be successful if you can't overcome these challenges. And oh, by the way, it will make you a better person.
In the beginning of a business or startup, it's kind of like all hands on deck. Everyone's doing everything. That works well in the beginning. That does not scale very well, and that does not get us to grown up. And, some people will be able to make that transition from startup to grown up, but often many can't make that transition. How do you transition from their level of competence in our startup journey or whatever? And can people break through that? How have you dealt with that in the past?
So people enter at different stages. They can definitely change and grow and develop into from one stage to the other if they want to and if they're given the opportunity. But I would say it's not necessarily guaranteed that they will. And I think the better self-awareness you have about where you want to play in the startup ecosystem, the more likely you'll find your fit. That's also true for founders. And I think having the self-awareness of the kinds of things you want to do is essential for your success in that almost like out of control experience of being in a startup.
The other thing I've found is many times founders and entrepreneurs, we love novelty. And novelty is wonderful in the beginning because you're trying new stuff, you're developing all of that. But once you've got a product to market fit, or you've got a service that's now working, and now we really need to think about scale and systems and all this boring stuff, the founder or the entrepreneur often just starts creating chaos. How do you get to kind of that self-awareness, and at what stage do you fire yourself essentially and move on to the next thing? And the next thing may be a project within the business. It may not be outside of the business.
You're exactly right that many founders are much better off hiring professional leaders around them, keeping their fingers in the business and, allowing them to kind of fly and do their own thing. And the self-awareness comes from your own internal state. Like, I think there are two aspects of what we call self-awareness broadly, but it's actually self-awareness and awareness of your impact on others. So self-awareness is you're feeling inside. Plenty of founders will say, after a certain stage, I feel dead inside. That's a really good sign that something is not working, right? That something has to get changed. And you might want to really go delve into what are my values, what brings me joy, what brings me purpose, and do some journaling around that so that you can kind of figure out what's missing here. The other part of self-awareness is your awareness of your impact on others. So for example, back to the chaos thing, you're making everybody around you less effective and crazy, and you have to come to terms with that through 360 feedback or from, insights that others will be willing and able to share with you so that you have a sense of actually the damage you're causing inside of the company and the conditions that you say are important to you.
A lot of your work as a founder is kind of setting, and I don't know if you can actually intentionally set company culture. I don't know if to some extent I think it's just derivative of your personality. Am I right? Or can you be more intentional about company culture?
I think it's both. I think that first of all, you are who you are as a starting point. I believe people can change, but as a starting point, when you start your company, you bring yourself and you have a set of values, whether you've done the work to kind of clarify them or not. But I do believe you can grow and you can change, and you can also look at the culture and ask the question, is this working for us?
One of the things I think you've said is that leadership is kind of an unnatural act for many first-time founders. And that's definitely something I've resonated with at times for sure. What do you mean by that? And how do you, as a founder, become a good leader?
Yeah. Leadership is an unnatural act. And if you question that, ask yourself this. Is it natural for you to go give feedback to people who, are like your friends, like people It's not natural. All these sort of aspects of leadership are just unnatural and are learned behavior. And if you're going to be a successful leader, you're going to have to do the work of learning what they are and learning how to do them.
How do you put people on board with your vision? I mean, people want more than just a paycheck. They want to be on board with a vision, some values that they care about, a mission that the company is on. Where do you stand on that, and how do you calibrate?
I think that the vision, the purpose, the reason for being of the company is important. It's important in that it motivates people day to day. It guides their work day to day, and it helps them understand the bigger picture of what they're doing. The truth is that research has proven that people are much more motivated when they understand the impact of their work. and that they can see progress. And vision helps mark that, sort of towards the goals. And the thing about culture is that, I think that culture, people have dumbed down culture to mean like, we like each other. And that's nice. That's rapport. That's one small part of culture. It's more fundamentally, what are expectations of each other? What are the behaviors around here? What do we expect around here? So kind of like the social lubrication at work is actually very helpful. It's a part of culture, but understanding what's expected from each other, that is the essential part of culture you cannot skip.
That's why I'm often skeptical about these kind of offsites where you spend 2 days coming up with your values and all of this sort of stuff, and it tends to be a waste of time for everybody, and you've got work piling up in the meantime. So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you get that balance right?
It comes back to, it's like not just the founder or the CEO who needs to be delivering that message. It needs to be, actually, I'm a big fan of the middle manager. It needs to be the middle manager who understands that vision, can translate it for that person, and is also there to be like, I see you. I see the work you're doing. I see how you're doing it. I care about you. And the work you're doing matters. And if you remind people of that, now and again, in the context of vision, in the context of culture, that is very effective for people, because people want to stay with companies because of their bosses or leave companies because of their bosses.
Yeah, I totally agree that people want to stay or leave often because of their bosses, and being seen and being appreciated, absolutely 100% agree with that. You've seen the inside of so many different companies and different leaders and of different sizes. What are the few most commonalities that you find as leadership blockers, and how are you unblocking them?
Yeah, there's a few commonalities. Number one is that when you are the leader, your suggestions are orders. And so you don't know that because you're just like brainstorming, but actually people are taking them like orders. And so that's a commonality that people do not anticipate, right? They do not realize it. Now, I will also say leaders don't realize how much they need to repeat themselves. And other people have their own priorities. They either have the way I've done it before playbook, the things I enjoy doing playbook, the sort of things I think we should do playbook, or the I'm just working to keep my head above water playbook. Okay, all of those playbooks are not your playbook as the leader. Your playbook as the leader needs to be repeated all the time so that people kind of stay on track with what's important, and they're able to kind of pull themselves out of the muck and mire. But it doesn't just happen. You as a leader have to figure out, what are your triggers? What are the things that you need to really be mindful of as you're building your company, and make the behavior adjustments that you need to.
So what have been the best tools for doing those things, for kind of calibrating and really getting that self-awareness as well? Like sometimes you're not really even aware that, hey, my suggestions are taken as commands, or all of those sorts of things. How do you get that 360 view, I guess?
Well, the way you get the 360 view is by getting 360 feedback. So like as a coach, it's a lot of what I do is I work with my leaders, and I talk to the folks all around them and ask them what's working about this person's style, what's not working, what are their obstacles, blind spots, weaknesses, development opportunities, and what specific behavioral suggestions do you have to help make them a better leader. And that gives people a roadmap, both with what other people are experiencing from them, and also a specific roadmap of things that they can do to make the changes necessary. It's a very powerful process. If you don't want to hire a coach, or you don't have like an HR person who can help you with 360 feedback, you can ask your people, what's one suggestion you have for me to make me a better leader?
Totally. Like I said, you've seen the inside of many businesses. What have you changed your mind on? What's something that over the years you've had an opinion, but you've changed your mind on?
I've definitely changed my mind on like the need to quote unquote empower people in a workplace. And actually I'm bigger right now in alignment. Everyone needs to be aligned, and we're running in the same direction, and we all understand our roles. And that is what is essential, rather than people feeling like they have kind of full autonomy. I think you get full autonomy in the context of being aligned in service of and understanding your role.
Alisa, thank you so much for your time today. You've been very generous with your time. Your podcast is From Startup to Grown Up, as is your book, both excellent. And you've got a newsletter, which we'll, of course, link to in the show notes. So anywhere else where people can find you?
Just to say that on my website, you can download what I'm known for in part is my scripts. In the back of my book, From Startup to Grown Up, there are 14 scripts to help you have delicate conversations, difficult conversations. And there are 5 additional scripts on my website and 1 to make your life better. And you can get those at alisacohn.com/scripts.
Perfect. And we'll link to that. Thank you so much, Alisa.
Thank you, Allan. This is so fun.
Thanks for tuning in to the Lean Marketing Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by the Lean Marketing Accelerator. Want to take control of your marketing and see real results? With the Accelerator, you get proven strategies, tools, and personalized support to scale your business. Visit leanmarketing.com/accelerator to learn how we can help you get bigger results with less marketing. And if you enjoyed this episode, please leave a review or share it with someone who would find it helpful. See you next time.